Welcome to Awaken the Mind,
Relax.
the NLP and Hypnosis Guide, hosted by David Uhas.
You need to understand. If you can't, you must. And if
You're listening to Awaken the Mind, the NLP and Hypnosis Guide, a podcast that inspires the curious to the professional to discover meaningful content and pursue their passions. My name is David Uhas, and I'm a master NLP practitioner and hypnotist, best known for losing over 100 pounds and running 6 marathons in 2 years. And I'm sitting down with hypnotists, NLP practitioners, and coaches to talk about their process, the lessons they've learned, and how to make an impact in the lives of others.
Our guest today is Elaine Turcotte. She is uniquely trained as a certified master practitioner of NLP, certified master practitioner of timeline therapy, master NLP coach, and master hypnotherapist from the Tad James Company in Nevada, and has traveled over 35 countries. Elaine is also a certified Momentum sales coach and studied at the Institute for Life Coach Training. Reading from her website, a friend of mine says that the gift is beside the wound, and I couldn't agree more. I believe my gift is the impact I make on the world in helping my clients fast track or alleviate the pain I once felt, specifically around sales, work transition, relationships, and health. And she asks, do you see the gift beside your wound? Welcome, Elaine Turcotte. Hi, Elaine. How are you doing?
Good. How are you, David?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm so glad that you're here today. Thank you for coming today and talking. Tell me about growing up. What was it like and where were you born? What schools did you go to? Where do you live?
I grew up in a small town in Eastern Ontario, Canada. Population under 2,000 people. A home of Bose beer, and it's called Kill, Ontario. And we moved around a bit. I ended up in Ottawa, and then in my 20s, I moved to Winnipeg, where it was minus 53 in winter. It was rather chilly. I've been in Toronto for about 14 years now, so it's a little bit warmer here. I like it here.
Nice. Well, I thought I had it challenging in Illinois. When it gets down to like 10 degrees, it's too much for me.
It's minus 53 is cold.
What are the summers like there? What are the springs and falls?
In summer, there are a whole lot of mosquitoes.
Oh, no.
It's a beautiful, beautiful place. I spent 3 years there, and I was very lucky to spend the 3 years there. It taught me a lot.
Nice. I read on your website that you coach with sales, work transition, relationships, and health, and there were specific stories with all of those. I am curious, and I know our listeners will be curious as well, what brought you to coaching? How did you get here?
I spent a year working and going to funerals. I worked way too much, and the third funeral that year kind of made me hit rock bottom, to be honest. And I bought a condo in a really weird way. I bought the first one I saw because I was living in a basement apartment and I just couldn't live in the darkness anymore. So I decided to buy a condo, and I bought the first one I saw, and I put an offer in on it at noon, and at 6 p.m. I flew to South America for the entire time I was gone.
Wow.
And when I got back, my real estate agent was a friend of a friend. And when he gave me the keys, he said, what? What are you doing? We ended up having a heart-to-heart, and he introduced me to a man named Philip McKernan. And Philip McKernan changed my life. I ended up in Ireland on a retreat, kind of a group coaching situation. And when I came home, I started making all kinds of changes. And one of them was my work. So I started looking into coaching, and it made such an impact in my life. And I'm just so happy to help people in the same way.
I would like to read a quote from an article that you wrote.
I remember the moment I knew I was done. I was sitting in my car in a school parking lot. I had driven away 3 times, and I couldn't force myself to go in. Tell me about that story.
So I was a yearbook rep for Jostens, and I owned the territory for a number of years. And I loved yearbooks. I loved it so much. I did yearbooks when I was in high school. And I just hit the point where I couldn't do it anymore. It was January and it was cold, and I knew I had to go in and see this teacher, and I didn't have an appointment, but I knew it was one of those things I had to deal with, and I couldn't force myself anymore. And I knew I was done. And it took another 11 months after that to actually be done, because I had to sell and train and do all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I knew that I couldn't do it anymore.
So you got into coaching, and I read on a blog an interesting, where was it that you had met the girl that was in Peru?
It was in an orphanage in Peru, yes.
Can you share that story?
Sure. So Philip McKernan was the coach I worked with in Ireland, and he also does an experience called Give and Grow. And so we went to Peru to volunteer in orphanages. And we did some hiking, some very miserable, wet, cold hiking, and then a few days of personal growth in this amazing retreat center. And on the third day, we went to an orphanage in Peru, and it was a disabled children's orphanage, and it was quite tough. We didn't go to build anything. We didn't go to, we went to play with kids, and as a busy entrepreneur, that's not something we do very often. It was quite difficult to just play and be playful. And so there was a little girl that was hiding. She was against the wall behind the stereo, and I kept trying to connect with her, and she kept pushing me away. And I kept bringing her toys, and again, she would push me away, and she didn't have any speech. But finally we connected with our hands, and we started playing patty cake, and we made eye contact at one point, and I saw tears streaming down her face, and it was just an incredible experience. I think about her often, but it taught me that I don't need stuff. That connection is just so powerful. You don't even need language, but knowing that there's a human that you're interacting with and connecting with, and that's pretty powerful. It was a great moment.
Nice. Tell me about what kind of coaching that you do. Well, just go ahead. Tell me about your coaching. What kind of coaching that you like? I saw on your website about with sales and also with relationships. Tell me about your business.
So yeah, I have a few clients that are single and have just gone through some heartbreak. And so we do some NLP coaching there. I've been single myself, and I did a breakthrough this summer. And when I came home 2 days later, I had my first date, and I've been single for almost 2 decades. So it works. And now I get to help other people get rid of their, the fear of being alone is a big one. And so it's awesome to see that whole process unfold and, finding your ideal partner. I also do some health coaching. I had adrenal fatigue myself, created by not taking care of myself and working way too hard and not doing the things I needed to. And so I have dropped 90 pounds in the last 2 years.
Wow. Congratulations. I saw some before pictures, so you look wonderful. Wow. That's great. Cool.
It is a lot. A friend of mine says that her 10-year-old weighs that. So I've dropped one of her sons.
An entire kid.
And so, yeah, I work with clients who just want to get in better shape, and really around inflammation and adrenal fatigue and how your body just switches those hormones. I've learned a lot about that and nutrition, but also, the limiting beliefs and the decisions that we made. I was very young when I decided that women looked a certain way in my family, and I needed to look that way in order to fit in. And that's not the case. I'm in better shape than I've ever been. So it's great. And I also do sales coaching. I was introduced to a company that does online gamification sales training that is based in, or at least in part, in NLP. And so they use concepts like anchoring and pattern interrupts and reframing. And it's a really cool way of learning sales and it goes straight into your unconscious. It's, over time, it changes those behaviors, and it's a really great way of learning sales.
Did you say gaming?
Yeah, so you go in and you learn a little bit about sales, and then you actually role play a sales simulation. And if you say the wrong thing, it kicks you out.
So like a virtual reality thing.
It is. And then there's a game show part of it that, is super cheesy, but it tests you on what you learned. And then you go to the next mission and it gets a little bit harder. But yeah, I've never been thrown out of a sales call before. And one of the trainers, when they were training me, said, yes, you have. You just didn't know it. They were too polite. You just didn't get a second appointment. I said, fair enough. So it's a great way of learning, especially as an adult, because you're in your home. It's okay to fail. And then there's some actual coaching, because we know in NLP, we either delete, generalize, or distort. And so what we want you to do is distort the concepts to what you're selling. And so we coach around that in a group coaching situation, which is really great, because the new people learn from the seasoned people, and it's pretty awesome.
Okay, I want to go back to the single thing, because I'm fascinated with this. I'm tired of people asking me, so are you dating anybody now? And I'm like, I am done. I have 4 kids. They're grown up. I have a cat and a dog. I've got a job. I'm busy enough with that I've gone through a divorce, and fortunate that my ex and I are on good terms, and she's remarried. But I honestly just don't feel a desire right now anyway. And maybe now is just not the time. But I know that there's a lot of people out there experiencing, I know I did initially when I thought that I wanted to date. If you go to the bars, it's not something that's desirable now anyway to me. And it just seems like all your friends are already married. So what are some tips for somebody that's single, that's wanting to get back out there? Or how, I'm not even sure what to ask.
Well, when I work with my clients, and I went through this process myself, we get rid of all the junk, the trauma, the stuff that's holding you back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We've all got baggage, especially around dating and relationships. And so when we start unpacking that and understanding the patterns and why we attract the same kinds of people, and get really clear on what it is that you're looking for. So many people attract what they don't want because that's what they're focused on. And I used to read all of this stuff and it made sense to me, but I didn't have a way of changing it. And NLP, and especially timeline therapy, has given me that way of refocusing and getting rid of the baggage, and so that you can believe that there's somebody out there for you. Because if you want it, but you don't actually believe it's going to happen, guess what? Go out to the world to prove what you believe about yourself, right? And so, right. Yeah, the fear of being alone has been a very common thread among my client and myself as well. And so when we start getting rid of that kind of stuff and unpacking it and replacing it, often my clients have dates within a couple of days. And it's not like they're doing anything different. They're just attracting better people. So yeah, I also was introduced to a matchmaker just recently, and she dates online for you. So she reads your profile and she does all the work, and you don't have to sit through all of the messages. It's great. And it allowed me to let go of the problem. It allowed me to put it in somebody else's hands.
Nice. Nice.
Which was, when you're too attached and you really want it, and that energy does not allow something to come in, right? So, yeah.
My biggest fear is that my cat will eat me if I pass away after like 2 days. You don't feed him. I hear that the cats will eat you. That's why I have a dog now, to chase the cat away.
That's why I don't have a cat.
You were talking about beliefs that people have, and can you share some type of process? I know that when I talk about limiting beliefs, people don't really know what that is until maybe they've experienced somebody working them through a limiting belief. So can you share something to where somebody would get the idea of what a limiting belief is and how it would actually work, or what it would look like or feel like or sound like to transition from one belief to something different?
Yeah, I mean, it's a term that I'd never heard of until about 4 years ago. I had purchased a personal growth course and they used this term, and I had no idea. I'd never heard of it, but it makes sense. Limiting belief is just a belief that limits you. It's one that doesn't serve you. Often they are big unwords like unworthy or unlovable, and they are things that you believe about yourself that don't have to be true. But we made a decision somewhere along the way, usually from 0 to 7, that we were unlovable. Or one of the big ones for me was I have to be perfect to be loved. And when I worked with a coach to replace that one, it was a process of active visualization. And I went back to when I was 2, to a moment where, I decided I needed to be perfect to be loved. And when we replaced it, it was a pretty subtle moment. And yet it was huge because I have a niece who was 2 at the time. And I thought I would never treat her that way. But we treat ourselves the way we would never treat anybody else. And getting rid of that one has allowed, or replacing it, I can be me and still be loved. That's what I believe now. And so many of my clients don't believe that they will find someone that loves them, or, they attract people that like them, but it's not mutual. Or, everyone's a cheater. You're going to attract a whole lot of cheaters.
Yep.
If you believe that everyone cheats, then guess what? That's what you get. So when you start replacing that kind of stuff, often it's a decision that you made that, somebody said something or didn't say something, or, did something or didn't say something, didn't do something when you were really young. So yeah, it's really cool when we start looking at what's holding you back, those beliefs that are really getting in your way.
This also reminds me of the law of attraction. And my kids mean to tell me I'm going to look at a pearl necklace and all of a sudden, bring, it appears on my neck. I'm like, no, it's not that. And I keep thinking about every time I get a car, as soon as I get it, there's like 20 of them in my neighborhood. They were always there, but I never realized it until then. They're everywhere. So that sounds like the beliefs also attract that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on dating sites forever, and I used to get nothing. I would hear crickets, and I would send out messages, but I was going out into the world to prove that I didn't deserve love. And so that's what I got. And by replacing those beliefs and doing the exact same thing, still take action. I mean, no one's going to come knocking on my door here. But just by getting rid of those beliefs, the same action that I'm taking is getting different results. And it's so much easier. There's not as much frustration.
Okay, I'm done with dating. Moving on.
Hopefully not forever.
But I'm definitely curious, and I think that's fascinating that you work with people around that. I hadn't even thought about that, how powerful a coach can be with somebody working around the stuff that they're carrying around. And so very cool.
It's often your story that will help people. And I've had to talk about not dating for 20 years or 2 decades a lot in this process, but it's really allowed me to heal some of it as well. And I think that because I have gone through that, I can really help and understand those people that go through it as well.
You'd mentioned about the health coaching and adrenal fatigue. Can you tell me about that? My backstory is after my divorce, I lost over 100 pounds and ran 6 marathons in 2 years. And people would come to me and ask me, and it literally got irritating. Well, you eat less and you exercise more. And then they're like, no. What did you do exactly? What was the magic? They wanted this magic pill. And that's actually kind of how I got into coaching. I was searching for this way to explain to people. They wanted to know, and I really wanted to know as well. It's like, okay, really, what did happen to me? And since then, I'd had a stressful job. I went to a different job, and it was stressful. And someone had suggested at that time, because I put on about 60 pounds. And, of course, then I go into all of these beliefs about myself, and it just seemed to like spiral. Somebody did mention adrenal fatigue. Can you tell me about that?
So I worked with an integrative health doctor who tested my cortisol levels. And adrenal fatigue is when your body switches cortisol and melatonin. So melatonin is the hormone that allows you to go to sleep. And when that was supposed to be kicking in, the cortisol would kick in. So I was exhausted but couldn't sleep. And then the melatonin would kick in the morning and I couldn't get out of bed. And so I worked with the integrative health doctor. We did a whole bunch of supplements. It changed how I ate. And I started walking, and my first walk was 3 kilometers. I'm Canadian. And it took me a 3-hour nap to recover from it. I could not climb a flight of stairs. And I worked in schools, and there was tons of stairs, but sometimes I would look at the stairs and go, I don't know if I can make it up there, especially carrying a whole pile of yearbooks. And it worked. I dropped 60 pounds, but then it plateaued. And really NLP and timeline therapy allowed me to dig into the rest of it, because I was eating, I was exercising, I was doing the eat less, exercise more thing, and it was not working. From November until August, I worked out 4 times a week, a 45-minute boot camp. I ate no sugar. I was on a very strict diet, and the scale did not move. It actually went up.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
And it was insanely frustrating. And, things like I'm not seeing results, that's a belief. And when we replaced that, the next week, the scale started dropping. And I was doing the same thing. It wasn't like, but my body was just holding on. I also had to dig in to a lot of the reasons behind the weight. And quite honestly, it was protecting me. I was the shy kid as a kid, and I was always the one kind of in the corner, just like the little girl in the orphanage, reading a book and being quiet. And it was really protecting me from finding a partner, from being aligned, from going after the work that I really wanted to do. And so when I started making those changes, especially work and then diet and really taking care of myself, I had to learn that it was okay to take care of myself and not everybody else around me. The weight started dropping, but it was a combination of a whole lot of things, especially those limiting beliefs. Women look a certain way and I have to protect myself. And these are the reasons why. And when we started digging up all that baggage and replacing it and getting rid of it, the weight has dropped and continues to drop.
Interesting. I'm mostly kinesthetic, and I'm like an auditory learner. And I've really tuned into that. That's something that I started to learn before I got into the NLP training. But really, at first, like you were talking about just changing your beliefs, I'm thinking some people who hear that sounds too good to be true, might have that belief, right? That sounds too good to be true. Yeah. And there's so much more going on, because I notice that when I start to acknowledge what my feelings are, it can even change my hunger level, because I'm trying to possibly eat to fulfill some kind of need in me, which feeding, for me, it's about love. Food is love. And so the transition for me is changing that belief around, I'm an auditory talker, so you're actually hearing me think out loud sometimes. It's not always pretty.
I love it.
But I've noticed that there's times where I feel like I'm starving, and it's not for food. It's for something else.
We talk about emotional eating, and we recognize that sometimes we're eating not out of hunger, and yet we don't have a way of dealing with it or changing it. And so timeline therapy has allowed me to get rid of the loneliness and the rejection and all those negative emotions that we hold. And, it's not hunger, but I didn't have a how before, and now I do.
Nice. Thinking of listeners with the timeline therapy, the word therapy makes me think of, and I've gone through counseling before, I went through a divorce, and it's good to talk to people. One of the needs that we have, right, to be connected with other people. And I remember it feeling, God, I don't want to be drugged through all this crap again. So I even not looking forward to going to a counselor appointment. And the NLP work and the timeline therapy is not that at all. It's very light, and you don't even have to necessarily share with the practitioner what the stuff is. I even remember having God, I don't even want to share this, but there's this feeling of whether it's being ashamed or whatever the emotion attached to it is, to share it with somebody else. And there's something really freeing about the timeline therapy and the NLP work where you can just keep it in your own head.
Yeah. I did some grief counseling many years ago, and my counselor told me that I feel too much and that I should stop. And
Stop?
then he broke up with me.
He fired you?
He fired me because I didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't helping. And so most of the time I would talk about it a little bit, and then I would get overwhelmed and I would just shut down. And I was introduced to NLP in Peru on that trip. I had to go to Peru to find out about NLP. There was a coach that was part of the group, and we had a conversation at dinner, and she lives in Whitby, which is, half an hour away from me, but I had to go to Peru to meet her. And the first time I went to her office, I thought, oh God. And you know what? I felt amazing. We got rid of those negative emotions, the big five: anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. And I felt like a bullet coming out of a gun. I had so much energy. I had just unloaded a backpack full of crap. And I was ready to take on the world. And I didn't say a word about any of the stuff, all of the stories. I didn't have to share any of that. And I felt just so incredible.
I'm curious also about your sales coaching. It sounds like you do coaching around people that are in coaching or any kind of sales.
A little bit of both. So I do some B2B, business to business coaching. And when I left my previous business, my territory at Jostens, I thought, I'm done with this. I never need to sell ever again. And I threw out all of my sales books. And then I tried to start a business, and it's all about sales. I quickly learned that one. And a number of coaches approached me about writing a course. And I thought, oh no, I've taken a number of sales trainings over the years, from Sandler to Brian Tracy, and some Jocelyn stuff as well that was pretty high pressured, where they'd set up a video camera and you'd have to role play, and then they'd send the videotapes to your manager. No pressure, right? And I thought, sales training is tough. Like, writing a course is tough. And but some of my friends were really struggling with their consult process. So they would book consult after consult, and they weren't signing any clients. And so I was going through the sales training at Momentium at the same time. And I used one of our coaching calls. I kind of hijacked it and said, all right, so how do I apply this to what I'm selling? How do I sell NLP breakthroughs? And so we came up with a process. And now my friends use a form that I have created that takes them through the whole sales process. And I've written a sales course as well for coaches that's a little bit softer. A lot of sales training out there is event-based. It's a few days. It's really expensive to travel. It's not geared towards B2C, business to consumer. And so it was really about writing something that was a little bit softer. I hate sales, and I will gladly say that. People told me that they didn't think I was going to make it in sales. And I have a, oh yeah, watch me kind of thing to my personality. So I dug in and I figured it out. But it's about getting people to embrace sales and without being pushy, without being salesy, without being all of the, normal things that we think about sales.
Is that now? It sounds like that's a belief. Somebody has a belief that it's one way, and
Yes. Having been in sales for over almost 15 years, there's that typical idea of what a salesperson looks like. And I did not fit the mold. So I had to figure out my own style to make it. And I also worked with high school students and teachers and principals, and that high pressure, pushy stuff is never going to work. So now I help people kind of really reframe sales and embrace it and just learn the language and the process.
I think of the old days, the vacuum cleaner salesman would stick his foot in the door as it was being slammed. I know everybody's had some experience with the slimy, greasy, it sticks on you, just that relationship, and shifting it from that to actually this person is wanting to buy. One of the best salesperson that I have ever met, and it was a car salesman, and he didn't want me to have something that I didn't want. There was absolutely no pressure. And I was there because I needed a car. And that kind of relationship where he was there to help me get what I wanted, I really had a whole different look on, because I thought all car salesmen were the car salesman.
It can be, but not all of them are.
Not all of them, correct. Yeah, and it probably depends on what kind of market that you're in and things like that. But having said that, even car salesmen could really benefit from NLP training to look at it from that way. What is it that they're wanting? Because I'm just filling that need. Can you talk about that a little bit? The beliefs, or what most people who are in sales and have a belief that's not working, and shifting it to a different belief or a different technique?
Technique-wise, I find that salespeople, and now I just listen for the fun of it. I was at the gym and somebody was trying to sell carpets, and I love overhearing sales conversations. And what the typical salesperson will do is put up their like nice shiny, here's my carpet or my car or whatever, and they'll start talking, and they will not ask the person a single question or anything like that. And so really understanding the process, finding the need, coaching is a lot about asking the right questions, and so is sales. And when you understand that, reframing the beliefs that you are selling things to people that don't want them, and you're being pushy and you're stealing their money, or you're like
Their time.
They're most likely interested because they came to you. You walked into that dealership, you needed something, you just needed help buying it. And if the person makes money from that, we all make a living, right?
Right. It's win-win.
Yeah, if you help me buy a car, that's an energy exchange. Yeah. And so there's nothing wrong with sales. It's just how we think about sales, because yes, it's the typical greasy, slimy approach that we've all encountered. And yet I always looked at it as really fun, effective communication. If I can get my niece to put on her jacket in the morning, I'm selling.
Right. We're all salespeople.
Absolutely. And my first sales trainer said that. She said, if you can convince someone to go see the movie that you want to see, you're selling.
Absolutely.
And that helped me reframe sales. And quite honestly, sales is still a predominantly male-driven industry. And women are starting to embrace it more and more. And I would love more women to embrace it, because if you're running your own business, if you're coaching, you have to sell your services. Otherwise you won't stay in business. That's just the fact of it. And really, if somebody is coming to you as a coach because they have a problem, you're just helping them, and you just need to sell your services in order to make that happen. And if you need a couple of skills, or to learn how to handle the I can't afford it, or the right questions to understand what the real problem is, then those are just a few little skills that'll help you in your business.
I was thinking about when you first are with somebody, like with sales. You're actually there with that person, and how learning about their modalities, some are dominant, some are not as dominant. Can you talk about that a little bit? The value of looking at it at that level?
Do you mean how people process things visually or auditorily or kinesthetically?
Correct. Yeah, the VAK. Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting because I used to be in the classroom teaching, and I'm auditory digital, so I always go to, does that make sense? And I wasn't speaking the language of all the kids that I was teaching. I needed to vary my questions. And so when you understand how someone processes most of their information, whether it's visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or AD, you can speak their language. And it's kind of like speaking English to someone who speaks English. It just makes more sense.
When I first started listening to that kind of talk, I'm like, that just sounds too, I didn't believe it. I do now. Because we think that everybody is the way we are.
That's so true. And, when I was teaching an online graphic design program. And all it would have taken was, hey, do you see what I mean? Or do you hear what I'm saying? Instead of, does that make sense all the time? Do you feel that? Would have gone over even better with some kids. So when you notice that, it's so much more powerful.
Our listeners are curious about NLP and hypnosis, as well as there are professionals listening. So that might even have slipped by the person who doesn't understand what you had just said. You just changed a couple words in your sentence. Can you go back and highlight? I heard you say feel, just for the person who doesn't have a clue what NLP is.
So some people process information visually. And when you are speaking to a visual person, if you talk in terms of, seeing things, do you see what I mean? It's going to connect with them so much more. If they're auditory, do you hear what I'm saying? And listening, and those sound words really connect with them. And with the kinesthetic people that process things through feelings and touch, do you feel it, or how would that feel? It's going to connect with those people a lot more. Sometimes when you hear, how does that make you feel? We all roll our eyes, but some people actually need that question. They process their world that way.
They're literally telling you what their primary style is, right?
They are. If you pick up on their language, if you're really listening to what they're saying and the words that they use, I often, on my phone, I have a list of those words, and I pull them up and I study them just so that I can be more aware of the language that they're using, so that I can use it too. Because my preference is AD. I like to make things make sense, and I like to understand them, but not everybody else does. Consciously practice those vision words and those listening words and those feeling words so that I can use them to communicate in the language that the person likes most, not always in my language.
Auditory digital, I understand visual, I understand auditory, I understand kinesthetic. Can you explain what auditory digital is? That's another.
Auditory digital is, probably the person that has a whole lot of self-talk, and I was definitely that kind of person. I needed to understand things. I needed to process them. I needed to make sense of the world. And so before I could process anything visually, I had to deconstruct it in my head. And so, yeah, does that make sense was my all-time favorite question, and I still use it. But I try to vary them.
Maybe I have some more auditory digital in me. I had mentioned earlier about talking out loud. Sometimes I have to listen to myself talk. So maybe, would that be auditory digital?
It could be. I think we all have a little bit of it. It's just, my go-to is that's where I automatically, and that's why I love NLP, because when I looked at it, it made sense to me. It was a system, and I could adopt the beliefs and it fit my model of the world, and it allowed me to understand everybody else's model of the world as well.
We're getting ready to wrap up, and I'm just curious about how somebody can get a hold of you if they're interested in your services. Tell me about your website and how to contact you.
Yeah, you can find me at courageousliving.me, and I have all of my information there. You can send me an email at Elaine, Elaine, at courageousliving.me, and I'd love to connect with you. There's also, I send out a special treat. I work with a lot of clients who are super successful in one area of their life. There's just one piece that's missing, either in their work or their health or their love life. And it's really centered around being brave and being courageous. So I offer a free audio download, a little bit of something that when you're getting ready to be brave, maybe you're going out on a first date, or you're going to the gym for the first time, or you're deciding to quit your job. There's a little audio download. Don't quit your job just yet, but you are going to. I know that I was shaking when I made that call. And there's a bit of an audio to help you get more courage and to get in touch with that courage inside of you.
I really identified with that courageousness. Looking at your blogs, I really enjoyed reading your blogs, and that's a very powerful value of mine. And sometimes when I say I'm courageous, I feel like a fraud. And then I go to this place of, you're really not that courageous. However, being courageous is, even when you're facing that fear, just going forward. Tell me about courage, because I know there's going to be other people out there that are challenged with being courageous. And I see that in you, by the way. You are very courageous.
Courage is my number one value. And when I decided to name my company, it was that one that stood out, but not because I'm always courageous, because I aspire to be. Courage is tough, it's hard, and it's that gap between where you want to be, where you are now, and where you want to be. And courage is what takes to get there. And I know that when I live from a place of courage, my life just gets better. And if I'm outside of that courage, when I'm not doing the things I know I need to be doing, that's when life gets really hard. And so I named it Courageous Living because I want my life to be brave. And a lot of people told me that the decisions that I made were really brave, but I didn't always feel it. And so it needs to be front and center in my life to remind me every day to be courageous.
I like what you said. I identified with that, with the not feeling it, but still making those choices that are very courageous.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have so enjoyed our time today. Thank you so much for being here. And you are a courageous, wonderful person.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today with Awaken the Mind, hosted by David Juhas.
Awaken the mind, you need to understand. If you can't, you must, and if you must, you can. Now that I got you, let me put you in a trance. Got you feeling hypnotic, your mind, let me massage it. Your thoughts are getting quiet, your stress subsiding. You starting to see images, but it ain't no mirages. Think it's time to calibrate. Take a breath and concentrate. Get into your subconscious. Time to feel the energy, the brain waves. Let's go deep into your memory. Beware of self, let the worries melt. All you see is you and you don't see no one else. Auditory digital, talking to yourself. It might seem bizarre, a feeling you never felt. This is your time to shine. Awaken the mind, the NLP and hypnosis guide. Yeah.